My source tonight is the former Democratic presidential nominee, former Secretary of State, former Senator from New York, and former First Lady Hillary Rodham Clinton. She is also the author of the new book, Something Lost, Something Gained, Reflections on Life, Love, and Liberty. And Secretary, thank you for being here. I want to talk about your book, but just given you have such a singular perspective in this race, you're the only person who knows what it's like to be a woman nominee facing Donald Trump. I wonder, what should Vice President Harris know that you wish you had known?
Well, Kaitlan, it's great to be with you tonight. And I think that she's running her campaign based on a lot of the lessons that we have learned over the last 8 years. First and foremost, how incredibly dangerous Donald Trump is. That wasn't maybe as clear as it should have been back in 2016, but it sure is now. And I think her warnings, the warnings of not just Democrats like President Obama, but the people who actually observed him up close for the 4 years he was actually in the White House, are warning us with everything they possibly can say. They are telling us, what he threatened to do when he was there before, what they think he would do if he got back again. And I think that as we move toward the election itself, Vice President Harris is doing a really compelling job of making sure voters understand there's a choice here. And the choice of Vice President Harris is somebody with the character, the values, the temperament, the discipline to be our president, and someone who has proven himself unqualified and unfit for that office.
Yeah, and you're referencing what General John Kelly has said, that his former boss meets the definition of a fascist. And I know you've said before that recently you said that Trump uses blatantly fascist rhetoric. Do you agree with John Kelly, with Vice President Harris, that Donald Trump does meet the definition of a fascist?
Kaitlan, I do. And it's not only people like former Chief of Staff, Marine General John Kelly, who is telling us this and warning us. It's people who have really studied what fascism is and what fascist leadership looks like. People like Professor Timothy Snyder, people like former Professor Paxton, who just recently came out and said that he had studied fascism during the war, particularly the Nazis, Vichy France, and he'd been reluctant to use the term. But he had concluded, as so many people now are, that sadly, here in America, the term fits. And one other thing that you'll see next week, Kaitlan, is Trump actually reenacting the Madison Square Garden rally in 1939. I write about this in my book. President Franklin Roosevelt was appalled that neo-Nazis, fascists in America were lining up to essentially pledge their support for the kind of government that they were seeing in Germany. So I don't think we can ignore it. Now, it may be a leap for some people, and a lot of others may think, I don't want to go there. I don't want to say that. But please open your eyes to the danger that this man poses to our country, because I think it is clear and present for anybody paying attention.
Yeah, you write in your book about Lindbergh and just how he was viewed in the U.S. as such a hero and what that would have looked like, had Pearl Harbor not have happened. You're looking back at the history of this country. But to hear such a significant statement like that one from you make a good point, not just people who have studied it, but from General Kelly, who worked very closely with Donald Trump. Obviously, General Milley did as well. But I think when you hear that, and then you look at it from a campaign perspective, there have been people who have said for years that they do believe Donald Trump has fascist tendencies or is a fascist just outright himself. I think the question is, does it reach voters that Harris needs to reach right now? How do you see that?
I think that's a fair question, Kaitlan, and I can't wholly answer it, but I think, number one, you have a duty when you're running for president. I tried to sound the alarm about him back in 2016, but it was really an uphill climb because people could not literally imagine that he posed a danger or that his character was so lacking when it came to the responsibility of being president. So I totally understand that. But now there's just too much evidence about what he wants to do, what he is saying he wants to do. So number one, I think that someone running for president, like Vice President Harris, really has a duty to sound the alarm. And secondly, I think that there are people who are still paying attention. You know, maybe they're, leaning one way or the other, and they hear John Kelly, or they hear General Milley, or they hear President Obama or Vice President Harris, and it causes them to think really hard. Why would we take that risk? And so I think that, sometimes in politics, you've got to do what is not only right, but important. And it is important to make a case as well as we can before this election about what kind of man this is and what kind of president he is promising to be.
Yeah, you just think about, the voters that we had at the town hall last night. Some of them, one was a widow and she's worried about paying her taxes and her bills and what that's going to look like. And so you hear that resonating and breaking through as she's still undecided. And so I just wonder, given your position in 2016, at this point in that race, when you're looking at where we are 12 days out, polling averages in 2016 at this time had you on pace for a bigger win than President Obama had 4 years before. And of course, you know better than anyone how those next 12 days went. What do you think Vice President Harris needs to do, in your view, to avoid a repeat?
Well, first of all, I don't think she has Jim Comey in the wings waiting to kneecap her, so that's good, and I'm very grateful for that. But I think she is doing what she needs to do, and in reporting from today, I think by CNN, a number of the voters who were at your town hall have said she convinced them, that she had shown the kind of empathy and concern about their problems, that she'd come forward with her ideas, her suggested policies. So I think she's doing what she needs to do. And from my perspective, that's not only her job, it's the job of all of us who are supporting her. It's obviously the job of the messaging, the advertising, everything that goes into the final sprint to the election. Because I think that the information is out there for voters who are looking for it. You can go to her campaign webpage. You can read about what she wants to do to lower the costs of housing, how she wants to take on people who are exploiting pricing of necessary goods, whether it's groceries or anything else. She talks about how she has a plan for long-term care, one of the biggest expenses that many families face. Yeah. So the policies are there. It's hard, though, as you know, you're a reporter, you know how difficult it is to talk about things like policies. So often what comes through are, the more, challenging and kinds of criticisms that you make of your opponent. So I think she's doing both. Well,
on that, I mean, you can have a debate over her proposal on spending and inflation, and she wants to go after price gouging. We've had some Democrats say they don't really think that that's a solution for that. But you're having a policy debate at that point. And I wonder, from your view, as someone who put out a lot of policy in 2016 and talked a lot about policy, do you think that she faces a double standard in the sense of people watched the town hall last night, voters say, well, actually, I do want specifics on the economy or on immigration. Maybe she should have said they should have done something else differently sooner. But, Donald Trump's not there because he didn't agree to do a town hall. Do you see it as a double standard in this race?
I really do, Kaitlan. And I see it as a double standard. Thankfully, we've made progress when it comes to women's in politics and certainly seeking the highest office in the land. And I'm very happy that we can say that. But there still is a double standard. And I think there's also a double standard because it still is very difficult to cover Donald Trump. He is incoherent half the time. Then he'll come out with something that is about how dangerous migrants are, and that cuts through, and then he goes back to talking about Hannibal Lecter or whatever is on his mind. And it's really hard to cover that. And so I think there is almost a default in the press where people go back and say, okay, well, at least Harris is trying to answer questions, and she is putting out real policy. So, let's go pile on her and make sure we know exactly what she's talking about, because there is no comparison. She has specific policies. Now, he tries to, avoid owning Project 2025, which is very specific and very scary. And I think it's rare that the press really goes after him on that and says, okay, look at what they want to do. Get rid of the Weather Service, for heaven's sakes. How are we going to know what we're doing every day? I mean, it's so bizarre. And yet he's hardly ever held to account for it. And so I do think there's a double standard. I think she understands that. She's been underestimated her entire political career. She gets up every day. She puts on those high heels. She goes out there. She makes her case. And I think that there's so much more energy in her campaign than on the other side. There is so much more enthusiasm. We see it not just in the rallies, but they've got a great ground game. I'm getting incredible reporting from the battleground states about how effective that is. So she knows there's a double standard. We all know if you're paying attention, and she's just going to keep, powering through it.